Welcome, everybody, to Hope Unabridged. I'm Angie Elkins.
And I'm Casey Brennan.
And we are so glad you're here today. We're having a conversation about how to have grace-filled conversations when we don't always agree with those we love. So this should be interesting. I think it's something that we can all learn. There's just some hot topics out there right now.
Yeah.
We're approaching holiday season, election season, just a lot of times when we are gathered with friends and family, and we all have differing opinions on things. And Casey, I think it's really interesting because when we don't agree, we tend to not have these conversations.
Yeah, we shy away from them.
Yeah. Why do you think we do that?
I don't know. I think it probably has a lot to do with the fact that we don't want to be wrong. We don't want to be disliked.
Right.
We don't want to start something.
Right.
When I think we should just have those conversations. They're important conversations to have. And I think it's a beautiful thing when we have different perspectives.
Yeah.
The sad thing is that a lot of times different perspectives lead to difficult conversations that lead to hurts and division.
Yeah. So it's okay for us to not agree on things.
Yeah, of course.
The thing that makes it hard is that we don't know how to disagree without being disagreeable, right?
Yep.
So I thought it would be great to bring on Pastor David Youth today. Pastor David is a husband to Rachel, dad of 3 kids, and grandfather to 2 sweet grandchildren. He has been the senior pastor at First Baptist Orlando for the last 15 years and a leader in our Orlando community here, but he's also my pastor. So I'm so thankful you are here today. Pastor David, welcome.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Great to see you, and Casey, nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you. Thank you.
When we thought about having grace-filled conversations, you were the first person I wanted to talk to because this is just who you are. You know, it's so easy and natural for you. So I guess we want you to tell us what the secret sauce is. And
Oh, yeah. I wish I knew what that secret sauce was. I got some ideas, but I'm not sure any of them are the silver bullet we're looking for.
Well, it's important for us to be able to have winsome and grace-filled conversations with those around us. So tell me, what do you think is at stake for us as believers if we're not able to have those kinds of conversations?
Well, I think what both of you just admitted is so important to remember. When Jesus prayed his prayer in John 17, what I would call the actual Lord's Prayer, he prayed that we might be one. And when he prayed that we might be one, he was not praying for uniformity. He was praying for unity. And there's a difference. When Paul talked about unity in Ephesians, when he said strive for the unity of the gospel, he's not talking about uniformity. Yeah. Uniformity is when we all have to agree on everything. It's when we think alike. It's when we dress alike. It's when we do all those things the same way. That's not what the scripture talks about.
Yeah.
When the psalmist 133 talks about how pleasant and good it is for brothers to dwell together in unity, he was not talking about uniformity. Unity is when we can be united around something bigger than our circumstances. Does that make sense? It's something that is bigger than the stuff around us.
Yeah.
I think it's a deep-seated unity. So for us as believers, what's at stake is that if we don't recognize that, then I think we've cheapened the gospel. We've cheapened grace, and we've forgotten that we first received grace. And we were called to then live by grace and to share grace. I just think it's about unconditional love.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any conditions on loving people and giving grace to people. There are no conditions.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think it's particularly hard with Christians. And it's like we all have these ideas and opinions of the way we want things to go. But we all have that ultimate goal that you just mentioned to advance the kingdom, right, here on earth.
Right.
So it seems like we just lose sight of that common good that we're fighting for, and we tend to take sides instead. Right. So let's just get right down to it. How do we have these grace-filled conversations when we feel like we're on 2 opposing sides?
Yeah. Angie, one time I used an analogy, and I'll use it here. It helped people. It helps me to understand this. If you've ever lived in a part of the country when a pond would freeze over or a lake would freeze over, I remember as a kid living up in North Arkansas where we had ponds to freeze over, and I can remember going out on the ice. And the one thing that you always had to remember is that if you're on thick ice, you can jump up and down, you can have fun, you can do whatever. But when you're on thin ice, you have to be very careful. And so it's a principle that everyone who lives in a part of our country where the ice, actually ponds and lakes freeze, they understand this. So let me use that analogy. When we are on those matters or subjects that we all must agree on, the gospel, the essentials of the gospel, salvation, the authority of His word, things that draw us together, I would kind of consider that thick ice. And we can really take a stand and be bold in our statement there and be bold in our conversation. But as we move away from that, as we get on thinner ice, where there's interpretive differences, you have to be real careful there. Yeah. Because the thin ice will break through really quickly. And so what I try to help people understand is be very careful to know the difference. Because if you're in the political realm and if you're talking to someone about the political, it's going to be mostly thin ice because there's a sensitivity there. It's just not strong. Now, if you're talking about, your belief in Jesus and your belief in God and your belief in grace, sure, you can be bold and assertive there because it's a core belief that you hold. Yeah. But as you move away from that, just be sensitive. So the first thing I would say is recognize that they don't have to agree with you.
Yeah, that's good.
You don't always have to be right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so much sense.
Humility means we don't always have to be right. Yeah. And so it's okay if they disagree. They might be right. But we have come to the decision and come to the place where we believe something and they have too. And there's room for both in that. Yeah. I think we have to appeal to that humility, which says I consider others better than myself. That's the mind of Christ.
I love that. And it's so important, especially when, let's just talk about family. Sometimes those, you're at a dinner table with a large group of your extended family, people that you love and deeply, deeply care about. You're obviously differently wired and you're going to have different perspectives. And one of my biggest prayers going into large gatherings is help me to continue to love them at the end of these conversations. But how are we to be respectful, in our responses and show love?
Casey, I think that's a great question because I think that's at the root of the problem. I think being respectful to someone in a conversation that differs with us has to do with our view of life. Our view of people. I really think it's about the sanctity of life. So if I'm having a conversation with you and you have a very different opinion and a very different view on something, I cannot, in order to make my point, vilify you or to make you a bad person so that enables me to make my point more assertively and more, forcefully. I can't do that because I have to see you the same way I see me. And you have worth and value and are loved by God just like He loves me. And if I can keep that perspective, even with those who differ radically from me, it helps me to calm down and to not do to them what is done so much in the media. And that is we vilify, we make them a demon, we make them evil, and they're not evil people. They're created in the image of God. Yeah. And they're different than us. It's okay.
Yeah. I think that's important to remember. The people that we are talking to are image bearers, just like we are.
That's right.
And when we're having conversations with those that we love, and I mean that like close friends or family that we genuinely love and respect, I think it's important that we realize that they've done their work and their homework, and they are doing what they feel is right for them to do, you know, and to respect that, to just respect.
I think that love, Angie, that appeals to a higher level, you know, rather than appealing to the issue, whatever the issue is that's dividing you. Appeal to a higher level. And you remember what Paul said in 1 Corinthians 13? He said, so what does it matter if you can speak with the tongues of men and angels? If you don't have love, you're just a clanging cymbal. You're just a noisy gong.
Yeah.
And he said, even if you have spiritual gifts and you can understand all mysteries and you can say to the mountain, be moved, but you don't have love, you're nothing.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I read that, he was talking to a very divided church in Corinth. And those words were given to a church who had groups and sections and different facets of it that thought one was better than the other. And so what if we made the appeal that he does? What if we made the appeal to love above all?
Yeah.
Appeal to a higher level, and that is that we will love them. We will not let that issue divide us because there's something bigger that unites us.
Yeah, it's so good.
I love that. What if you're talking to somebody who is just not interested in a different perspective? You know, like they're not seeing the love that you're seeing in them. You know what I mean? And what do you do with that?
Yeah, I think you do what Jesus did. You say, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, you simply do have to say, Jesus, you experienced this. You love, but they didn't love back. And I think that's where grace really comes in, because grace is unmerited favor. So if they earned your grace, it really isn't grace you're giving. So you give grace when they don't earn it. You give grace when they don't deserve it, just like he did with us. So I think, Casey, that's when you just have to bite your lip and say, just Lord, hold my tongue, and really try to say, I need to be like you, Jesus, in this moment when they were unkind to you.
I think it's interesting, as Casey and I were talking, you know, right at the top of the show, about these are topics that are on our hearts right now, and so we want to have conversations. And it's important for us, I think, not to be in an echo chamber where we're just talking to people who agree with us.
Exactly.
So I feel there's value in having a conversation with someone who sees things differently than me, because I loved what you said about how we're not supposed to be uniform, but we're supposed to be unified.
Yes.
And we don't want everyone to look like us. We don't want that. Like, that's not the country we want to live on. That's not the church we want to go to. We want just all the colors and all the thoughts and all the beliefs. And I think that's great. So how important is it that we are able to come together and say, you believe different? I just want to hear what you think. Like, let's talk about it, because your life experience, Pastor David, growing up where you grew up in the town you grew up in is different than mine, where I grew up. And I'm an embodied female, you're an embodied male. Like, there's just so many different experiences and things we can learn from each other. So why is it important to not just say, let's agree to disagree and walk away?
Yeah.
Why do we need to push in and have conversations?
The first thought I had when you were asking that, the number one quality that Proverbs describes as a wise person, the number one thing that Solomon said it takes to be a wise person is to listen. I mean, when you read the Proverbs, now the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. I'm not talking about the foundation of wisdom, but I'm talking about the characteristic that helps us to acquire wisdom. And he says, those who will not listen will become fools. They will become the laughing stock. They will become, ridiculous in their life and their belief. I think listening, Angie, is an incredible godly thing to do.
Yeah.
And so in those conversations, I love the fact that you have said, okay, let's quit just talking to one another and get out of the echo chamber. Let's have those conversations outside. I think that's awesome. And also that is being salt and light.
That's good.
Because who knows but what your comments about what you believe, the Holy Spirit take that and begin to work on them.
Mm.
So you may not see it.
Mhm.
They may not immediately agree and be changed or whatever, but they walk away, and I promise you they won't ever forget what they heard.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to I've always said, if Jesus is in the conversation, he wins every time.
Yes.
You know, there's not another thought, there's not another worldview, there's not another ideology. There is no one out there like him.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have to be content with is to be able to at least be in a conversation where we can talk about him to those who may not have accepted or believe or whatever. And so I welcome it. I think that's a really cool dynamic to be in those conversations where there's a whole lot of differences going on. Because you never know what God can do with that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever found yourself in a conversation where you start to feel the tension? How do you diffuse it? What do you do? Like, can you tell me a story of something that's happened to you where you've done that?
The last time that I remember being in one of those moments was on an airplane, and it was a conversation with somebody sitting next to me, and this was before COVID when we could, sit by people.
Yeah.
And I sensed that he was, and we were talking about our faith. We were talking about our perspective, our worldview. And when I identified myself as a Christian, as a follower of Christ, he immediately assumed that I was one of those I was going to get my Bible out and beat him over the head.
Okay,
and, I was going to really attack him.
Mm.
And so what I did to diffuse, and this is what I say to people, try to honor their opinion.
Mm.
Because it is their opinion. You're not honoring the fact that it's true. You're honoring the fact that it's their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And so and really what you're doing is you're honoring who they are as God's creation and somebody that God loves. So what I said to him is, man, that's fascinating. I've never really thought about it that way. And I'm really glad you told me that. I'm going to actually think about that. Something like that. And I said that to him in so many words, and he really changed his demeanor.
Okay.
Because he recognized I wasn't there just for him to hear my opinion. I was really there to hear his too. So I think the quicker you can do that and to say to somebody, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that. And I remember there's a story I've told a lot. I remember a lady on a plane that was a blackjack dealer in Vegas. And she knew I was a pastor because she asked me, and I told her. And I said, so you're a blackjack dealer? She said, yeah. And I could tell she didn't want to talk about it. She was kind of just shutting everything down. And I said, so would you tell me how that works? I'm really interested in blackjack. I played it as a kid, but I probably didn't play it correctly. I'd like to know about that. Tell me about that. And she said, are you serious? You really want to know? I said, yeah, tell me about it. And she began to tell me how the game works and what she does and all. And let me tell you, it opened up the door because it literally, honored her life.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think we have to quit making it all about us.
Yeah.
We have to make sure in that conversation with them that it's not just about us. We want to honor them. Hey, let me hear more.
Yeah.
So I think that's the best way I know how to do that. And it's worked for me.
I love that.
I hope it'll work for you.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think it's harder too when it's somebody that you know really well. And maybe you found yourself in these conversations before where there might be a little bit of resentment or bitterness from the prior time that you've had that conversation. But just as you're saying that, like, just to say those words, like, I honor your opinion. And really mean that and really listen to them. I think that would change the entire dynamic going into it. Just if we can remember to remember that.
Yeah.
Because we get all emotional and all heated up.
We do. Well, and we get defensive. I mean, I think that is when you were talking, I was thinking there are people listening right now who feel like it's our job to defend what we believe and defend our stance. And so to say, oh, tell me more about that, and I've never thought of it that way, they may feel like they're admitting that they believe or they agree or whatever, but tell me what your thoughts are about defensiveness as Christians. We get defensive.
Yeah, I think it's a misdirected passion.
Okay.
We're supposed to be passionate about what we believe, and we're not supposed to be ashamed.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean? I think that means that we're, as Peter says, be ready to give an account for the hope that dwells in you. In other words, be ready to talk about it.
Yeah.
Be ready to tell why. But here's the difference. We don't have anything to prove. In other words, the evidence of what God has done is going to be proven by his Spirit as the one who is the convictor and the guide into all truth. I think people think they have to play the role of the Holy Spirit. And so they try to convict somebody.
Yeah.
They try to judge them. And that's not our role.
Yeah.
Our role is just to, here's what happened to us, and here's what I believe, and here's what he's done for me.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's so good.
But we want to take that next step and say, and you have to believe this. No, they don't. They need to believe that.
Yeah.
But they don't have to, and you can't make them believe that.
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen it with even a very close family member. You can't make them believe something.
Yeah.
There's a work of the Spirit that has to happen. And I think if we were to rely on that more, I think it would help us with the defensiveness. We'll just calm down. And I know we think they're attacking us, and that's their unfortunate. We associate our views with ourselves, and we can't distance ourselves from our views because we are our views. But that's not really the case. I just think we have to remind ourselves they're just disagreeing with my view. They're not disagreeing. It's not that they don't like me.
Yeah.
So you have to go take that little trip, play that tape in your head, and make sure you remember that.
Yeah.
I love that. There was when Ryan, my husband, and I first went to marriage counseling, I will never forget this, and we used this our whole first 2 years of marriage. But rather than throwing whatever opinion, whatever perspective you have at each other, that's not going to do anything. And so she would say, literally go get whatever you want to call it, a disagreement bear, whatever. We chose a dinosaur, so we call it our disagreement dinosaur. And so whenever there's an obvious disagreement that we're having and we're both on different perspectives of it, we'll put that disagreement dinosaur in the middle of the room, and we'll just okay, you're the thing that I'm frustrated at. And it just changes the whole, and usually we end up laughing at the end of it. But I love that.
Yeah.
I love that.
It kind of takes the focus off of you and the other person, because you're really talking about ideas. And I want to make sure, Angie and Casey, that our listeners and viewers know that we've got to talk about what we believe.
Yeah.
This conversation we're having is not to say, hey, just be quiet, go in your closet, don't ever open your mouth out there. No. It's not saying that at all. It's just say it with grace.
Yeah.
Like you started off our time. Say it with grace. Let your speech be seasoned with salt, the scripture says, which means a witness.
Yeah.
And so, don't be ashamed and don't be afraid, but just as you talk, make sure that you do it in a way that you guys, have described. And hopefully we've been talking about something that helps.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite things that you say, I quote you often with this one, is as Christians, people should know more about what we're for than what we're against. And I love that because it's such a positive way to just approach the world and to put our salt out there. You know?
Yeah. And, maybe in this season that applies because it just seems like that so much of the vitriol that's out there is really against somebody.
Yeah.
And I really don't like talking about what I'm against.
Right.
I like talking about what I'm for, and this is why I live my life the way I do, because this is something that I am for.
Yeah.
So I hope that maybe that would help change the conversation also.
Yeah.
We ask all of our guests, I'm going to ask you, where are you finding hope these days?
Well, for me, there are two places that I find hope. Every time I hear a worship song, I have almost, not completely, but I've almost turned the news off my phone, off television, off wherever. It's too much, and I don't need it running around in my head and creating all kinds of issues. I have found myself listening to a lot more worship music.
Yeah.
Because when I worship, all of a sudden I take my eyes off the stuff around me and I place them on him.
Yeah.
And I fix them on Jesus. The second place is his word when I open it. And I just encourage people to read a little bit every day, just something out of the Bible. Read just a verse. You don't have to read, 5 or 6 chapters. Read a verse.
Yeah. Because
it gives you a whole new perspective. And then I'll probably add a third one, and that is get around people that you love and that they love you and are the relationships God's given you. And that'll take you back to a safe place and to a place of hope.
That's good. What's your favorite worship song right now?
Probably the song that has really ministered to me at the moment is actually one that I don't know how long she's had it out, but Natalie Grant just released that album that has a song, Face to Face.
Okay.
And it's a song that basically she reminds herself and us that we will see him face to face.
I love
and
it.
Even now, those moments of being face to face, I think of that whenever I think the world's absolutely gone crazy and there's no hope for the world. And then I think, but wait a minute, Jesus is coming.
Mm-hmm.
One day we'll stand before him face to face.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's okay. If I know what the finish line is like, I can run the race.
Oh, that's good.
If I can know what's at the finish line, I can make it through this race.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what's at the finish line. So that song has really it's really ministered to me.
That's awesome. I love it. I love hearing what you're listening to.
And Rattle.
Oh, yeah. That's a good one. We're singing that one a lot these days at our church. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Pastor David. It's a pleasure to get to have these conversations with you. I always love hearing what the Lord is teaching you and what's going on in your heart. And we love you. So
Well, it's so good to be with you guys. And Casey, nice meeting you. And I appreciate so much what y'all are doing together to speak truth and to speak love and grace into the listeners and the viewers. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much for joining us today on Hope Unabridged. We'd like to remind you, if you're watching us on Good Life 45, you can also listen to these episodes everywhere you listen to podcasts.
If you're listening and you would like to see the filmed version of the show or any of our other shows, check us out on Good Life 45 or on our YouTube channel and our app.
We hope that something you've heard today has really blessed you, and we would love for you to share this show with those you love. Just hit that share button on your podcast app or on YouTube and send it to a friend. With this program, we are finding hope in the unedited stories of our lives, and we want you to do the same.